Hey guys, my name is Matthew and this is my review of Lost Connections, Why You're Depressed and Where to Find Hope by Johann. Here we go. Lost Connections was recommended to me by a watcher of this channel months ago. I actually purchased the book months ago and it was a great recommendation. I really appreciate Michael because this book is great. It's kind of three books in one, if I'm gonna kind of tell it right. The first section of the book is kind of about why the way we're treating depression and anxiety as a society right now just isn't really working. Some of the problems with it, with prescription drugs and kind of all this types of stuff, really great. And I think the best section of the book, the second section of the book, is about the missed connections. Really, the title of this book comes from the second section, which gives us all these different missed connections, ways that we're missing, and why, kind of unlikely causes for depression, I suppose, or unexpected causes for depression. And the third section of the book is solutions to those problems. In this review, I'm going to be going over some of my observations of the book, some of the things that I noticed, starting with my favorite things and then going through the list down to some things that I didn't enjoy as much. And at the end of this review, I will give you my recommendation for who should consider buying the book. So to start with, this book felt legitimately different than any other book I've read about depression. I've read lots of different books from lots of perspectives, from religious perspectives and from more psychological perspectives, and from people who have done a lot of counseling and just different kind of things and different answers for why depression happens and what it causes and things like that and what we can do about it. And this book felt, like I said, just legitimately different. It offered some really different answers and some things that were, I think, backed up pretty well by the research. I just really appreciated this book felt very different. It felt like it was less guesswork and more actual answers to some issues. And not that Johann has all the answers to the depression anxiety thing. We'll get to that in a second. But it just felt different. It felt like someone who really kind of knew what they were talking about. I can actually say legitimately this book changed the way that I look at depression, and that's a huge positive, I think. It gave me some different framework setups, places to put things that I feel like I always had questions about why certain things are the way they are in depression. I personally have had to work through some stuff with depression and kind of the answers to that, and I feel like this helped me to understand better what's happening, why depression is happening. Yeah, legitimately just changed some of my thought processes around depression. Okay, for sure, 100%, the best section of this book is section 1. Like I said, there's kind of 3 sections of it, and the sections surrounding Big Pharma, and it was just really eye-opening. And that section in particular, I believe, really helped me to understand things that I had been missing about depression and what was happening with pharmaceuticals. And it was kind of really eye-opening, and it was the first worldview surrounding depression that I've seen that went, yeah, actually that I get behind it. It answers every question that I have. It's maybe one of my biggest recommendations for this year. I'm just, again, so glad that Michael recommended it to me. Just want to say that, yeah, I really recommend, if you don't read anything else, pick up the first section of this book and read that, because it's eye-opening for not just problems going on with depression specifically, but maybe some things going on in our world, in our country, if you're in the United States. Really eye-opening stuff. I'll say the whole book is super well researched. Obviously a lot of time, a lot of effort, money, travel, etc., went into this book. Really well researched. I really enjoyed how thorough he was surrounding these different topics. So I got finished with the first section and I went into the second section, which was like causes of depression, and it said that there were these 7 different misconnections that you have, and I went, okay, yeah, we're just getting into the same kind of depression book that I've always had before. I've seen this type of style, I've seen what's going on, and I was like, I enjoyed the first section a lot. I thought it was great, and I assumed that we were gonna go like kind of dip downhill in the rest of the book and just kind of do things and say things, and he was going to say the same things that I'd heard in other depression books. I kind of thought that we'd just taken a shift into every other depression book I'd read, and I was legitimately surprised by how good the second section was. It was different, again, than what I was expecting, and it was actually really helpful. It actually had some cool and interesting things in it, and it was also helping change my framework surrounding what depression is and what causes it. And I wasn't really expecting that going into the second section. When I saw the headings and I read the titles, I legitimately told my wife, I was like, this is going to be like every other depression book now. And it wasn't, and I was impressed by that. The second section is not as good as the first. I'm going to still say that. The first section is the best part of the book, but the second section was still really, really good. And I think that by itself is also worth reading. The last really good thing I'm going to say about this, I loved how compelling the writing was throughout the entire book. It was really, really excellently written. I was kind of interested in picking up the book again for the joy of the read. He just writes really well. He writes in a really interesting way. And overall, the whole book, throughout the whole thing, was really compelling. I kept reading because not only was it interesting, the material that he was giving us, not only was it changing the framework the way I was thinking, it was also written really well. I got 3 things that I didn't love so much about this book. They honestly all kind of rotate around the third section of the book. The first one is really just the whole solutions-focused part of the book. He offers very little that you can take and practically say, hey, I'm going to change something. I want to do something different. Here's what I'm going to do. He just doesn't give you anything. If you are currently suffering with depression, anxiety, and this is part of what he's pointing to, is it's not an individual thing. It's really our society's issue, but it doesn't give us any real thing to grab onto. There's no action step. There's no practical thing to move forward with in this book. And so the third section, I think, fell flattest. I'm not going to say flat because the third section honestly felt like a continuation of the second section, but just not as good. So I don't know. I just felt like the third section in general, the third subject of the book, also worth the read. It's got some interesting things in it, but it felt like it was a balloon getting deflated as I was reading those sections. It just wasn't as nice. It wasn't as good. And where I went into the second section going, I don't know how this is going to be, and it was better than my expectations. Because of that, I went into the third section, and I was like, well, maybe this is going to be better than I think it is. And it was kind of like, this is kind of what I was expecting. So the third section in particular, not as good. There's also a lot of social political stuff that if you aren't of that bent, you would struggle. And again, especially in the third section, you would struggle with that. He makes a really strong case for universal income, for instance, which is fine if that's what you believe, but that isn't so research-based. He really kind of stuck that story in. So there was some stuff there where it was just like, oh, he's clearly left-leaning, and that's not a problem, but that's not what this book was really about, and suddenly it found itself in the third section. Lastly, and this is kind of minor, but he spent a long time around, and it was clearly an impactful story for him, but around the apartment complex in Berlin, which happens in the third section, and it's like this reoccurring thing that he keeps coming back to it after he spent a long time on that story. And I thought the story wasn't that compelling for me. He obviously had a very life-changing experience there, which is awesome. It wasn't compelling for me in particular. So that story felt like it was too long, too much time was spent on that. So for my recommendation for this book, I have a really high level recommendation for this. If you personally have dealt with depression, anxiety symptoms, if that's something that you struggle with, especially if you're a little bit of an out of the box thinker, this book could change the way you think about depression, anxiety. It could really help you to create some framework in your own life that you say, well, I think I understand it a little better, and that can help you to understand kind of solutions for it better. There's some solutions that he doesn't talk about here that can be really helpful, like exercise, diet, things like that. And you can read other books to find that stuff out. But his framework surrounded by someone else's kind of practical steps could be really helpful for you in understanding your own depression and starting to get treatment for it that is above and beyond just the typical, hey, here's some drugs that you can take them every day and you should get better. So if you're looking for something different than that, this book is a for sure, definitely read. Really well researched, really well written, and especially the first 2 sections, just really excellent. Almost no complaints about the first 2 sections at all. And for a book of this size, to have read that much of it and not really have any complaints, this is an easy recommend. So this has been my review of Lost Connections by Johann Hari. If you enjoyed this review, please feel free to like and subscribe. I also put a link in the description where you can purchase this book. It helps our channel a lot. So if you are thinking about buying it, please use that link and it will help us out. Thank you guys again so much for watching, and as always, stay safe out there.